I'm going to continue my video series on Henry Ward Beecher and his sermons, and we're going to continue our coverage on the love of money. Here's the reason why. Because in Henry Ward Beecher's sermon, he included some names that you may have never heard of. Okay? And the first one is Payson Williston. Ever heard of him? Well, he had a son named Sam, or Samuel, okay? And this Samuel opened a fabric-covered button business. Okay? When the button business became successful, Samuel opened a school for average working men. And he died very wealthy. So it wasn't the money that was the problem here. It was the love of money. Well, Sam Williston never loved money. That's why he opened a school for average working men, so that they could all prosper in the same way that Samuel did. And that's why he died wealthy. All right, ever heard of George Peabody? Probably not. He started a banking firm called George Peabody and Company. But he had philanthropical work. And I know I probably mispronounced that word. But his philanthropy included establishing many educational institutes in the United States and providing housing for the poor in Great Britain. Was he ever out of money? Nope, he died very wealthy. Have you ever heard of Peter Cooper? Probably not. This guy developed new methods of manufacturing glues and cements. He started the Cooper Union Private College in New York for men and women. Okay? And at that time, all the students were awarded full scholarships. They didn't have to pay for their education. Isn't that nice? Did he die a poor man? No, he died a very rich and wealthy man. But he never loved money. He used money. And he acquired a lot of it. But he never loved it. That's the difference. Ever heard of Robert Leighton Stewart? Probably not. This guy refined sugar in New York. Okay? He helped erect a church in New York, and he supported the Union Army in the Civil War. He donated money to a New York hospital and to the Princeton Theological Seminary. What was his financial status at the end? He died rich. He had money. He used money. But he never loved it. That's the difference. Now let's contrast that to what happened to some people back in 1923. Okay? Now, there were 7 guys in 1923 that came together and they had this great big party. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you what happened to those people after 1923. Let's start with Charles Schwab. He was the president of the Carnegie Steel Company and the United States Steel Corporation. Not at the same time, but he was. He even, after he finished with the United States Steel Corporation, he ended up with controlling interest in the Bethlehem Steel Company. This was a wealthy guy. But then he committed adultery and he started gambling. He lost most of his wealth in the stock market. And he didn't have a single heir. He died broke. He died without any children. It was probably a very loveless marriage. He loved money. And that's what happened to him. Samuel Insull. Let's go into his. All right? This guy loved money too. He and Thomas Edison left General Electric. Not at the same time, but they did. This guy took over a power station in Chicago. He built the Harrison Street Station power plant. He sold low-priced stocks and bonds, which were devalued in the stock market crash. He actually had to go to France. He started living in Paris, France. And at the end, he died in a subway station. Can you imagine that? This guy only had one son. Yes, it's true that he built the Chicago Civic Opera House, but that's only because his wife happened to be a stage actress at the time. Okay? And sure, he donated large sums of money to local hospitals. And yes, he helped sell war bonds in World War I. But the thing was, this guy loved money. And because of that, he lost it all in the 1929 stock market crash and died penniless. And died of a heart attack at a subway station in Paris, France. All because he loved money. Let's go on to Howard C. Hopson. That's Hopson. This guy was the president of the Associated Gas and Electric Systems. You know what happened to him? After his company failed, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He contracted syphilis and went insane. And later died of cerebral hemorrhage. This guy loved money. And he paid the ultimate price. Arthur Cutten. This guy was a commodities speculator in the Chicago Board of Trade. Okay? He traded in commodities like wheat and corn and cotton. What happened to this guy after the stock market crash? He died of a heart attack and was penniless. That's because he loved money, not people. Not God. He didn't love God. He didn't love people. He loved money. And that's what happened to him. Richard Whitney. This guy was the president of the New York Stock Exchange. He married a widow and conceived 3 children. But then he started embezzling money. The stock market crash of 29 came, wiped him out. He actually ended up going to prison. After he got out of prison, he started managing a dairy farm. Think about that. This is a New York Wall Street wizard now managing a meager dairy farm. Well, finally, he did become president of a textile company, but he was never allowed to trade in the New York Stock Exchange after that. No, he didn't die penniless, but he died very modestly. For somebody that lived in mansions, he died very modestly. Jesse Livermore. This guy was another New York stock trader. He lost fortunes both in 1907 and in 1929. This guy got married not once, not twice, but 3 times. He had 2 sons with his second wife. And finally he committed suicide. Why? Because he didn't love God, he didn't love people, he loved money. And that's what happened to him. Ivan Kruger. He co-founded a construction company, but he never got married. Can you imagine that? His family owned match factories in Europe. But after the stock market crash, he went penniless and finally committed suicide. Now, I am going to give you a little bit of homework on this, because there was another guy, and his name was Leon Fraser. And in the comments below, I want you to tell me what happened to him. Because I want you to understand, here are 6 of the 7 guys that went to this party. Most of them died broke. Some of them committed suicide. 1 went completely insane. Some of them even served prison time. All because of their love of money. When you look up this Leon Fraser, I want you to tell me what happened to this guy. And I want you to leave it down here in the comments below. Okay? Let's see what happened to him. So who was the wealthiest of them all? St. Paul. Think about that. How did St. Paul die so wealthy, even though at the moment of his death, he really didn't have much of anything? Well, that's because the letters that St. Paul wrote to all those churches survived. They became a part of the Bible. Paul loved God so much and loved Jesus so much and wrote those beautiful letters, and God preserved them. And we read them to this day. And we Christians benefit from the wisdom and the knowledge that is contained in the letters of St. Paul. That by far makes Paul the richest guy that ever lived. Well, at least one of the richest. Think about that. God preserved the knowledge and the wisdom of St. Paul and put it in the Bible. And that's made St. Paul one of the richest men that ever lived on the face of this earth. Think about that. All right. I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.